This is Sarah Jane Pell, and you're listening to London Real.
London Real, one of the coolest up-and-coming podcasts.
What's up, London Reelers? It's Brian Rose. We got another crazy week here in the studio. We have had the hip-hop preacher and Dave Asprey, the bulletproof exec. I couldn't think of two different personalities, but they come together here at London Real. We're about to shoot another episode in about an hour, and that's Mr. Colin Pyle, and he's going to tell us about his trips riding around China and around India with his brother, and how they film those, and will now be trying to sell those to television networks, which it sounds like there's no simple thing about doing that. So there you go. But today we have on the show Ms. Sarah Jane Pell. This woman is fascinating. She is an artist researcher that specializes in the underwater experience. And you'll see when she starts talking that myself and my co-host James Dawson, we just shut the fuck up because she's fascinating to listen to. And when I was doing my research for her, I was like, I don't know what's up with this woman. She's a TED Fellow, which in itself is no joke. And but I couldn't tell. Like, I couldn't get my head around an artist researcher. Is she an artist? Is she a researcher? I know. But she's both, and she's the real deal, and she's very impressive how she talks. And she kind of was recommended to me by Rachel Armstrong, who you might have seen on the episode Earth's Bright Future. And Rachel sends me just the cream of the crop, you know. She sends me these great minds, and I love mixing up the London Real kind of semi-famous people like Howard Marks with these scientists, you know, because it makes you think about what's going on in their heads and get your idea around different perspectives, you know. I think it's a nice change to throw in some scientist people and get more of a feel for that for London Real. So I think you're really going to enjoy Sarah Jane. Just listen to her that first 20 minutes, man. It's just like my jaw almost drops, you know. She's a crazy mind, and I love to see the fact that there's an artist in there as well, and that she's not just a bookworm when it comes to her topic. So you're going to love that, and obviously next week we got everything coming up with a bulletproof exec. Man, he's a really intelligent guy, had some great things to say. He's the real deal, man. I'm going on the bulletproof coffee diet myself, and the coffee, the diet, everything, because I think he really sold me. And man, I've read a lot of books about nutrition, and I think there's a lot of bullshit out there, but I like Dave's look. And then the hip-hop preacher himself, man, this guy can talk. I think he blew my microphones out at one point, so apologies on the audio of that. If that's troubling, I'm going to see what I can do, so because he got excited, to say the least. There you go. We are sponsored by the folks that produce Alpha Brain. Yes, I have it always on me. I carry it with me. I have one a day, two on special days. They got tons of products on it now. It's crazy over there. If you want to go check them out, go to our website, londonreal.tv, and click on the link, and it'll take you to Onnit Labs. You can buy the Alpha Brain. You can buy the Hemforce Protein, Shroom Tech Sport, I'm a big fan of. They got the Primal kettlebells now with monkey heads on. I think I got one of those coming in the mail. So check that out, and all sorts of great products there. We're going to have a new sponsor coming up in another week or so, and it's going to be for Europeans and UK people. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be exciting, and that's it. Just walking the streets of Shoreditch here, I think, and you get some nice background. And if you want to come hang out with us, you know we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. If you're listening to us on iTunes, please subscribe, and come see our faces on YouTube. We're releasing short clips these days, and they're a lot of fun, like it kind of just snapshots into some of our old episodes, like 5-minute clips with Rupert Sheldrake, Dorian Yates, Jacques Fresco. Man, maybe we have interviewed a lot of cool people. We're on like episode 90-something right now. We're going to be at 100 soon. You know, I never thought that would happen. That's a little crazy. So yeah, I expect more cool stuff coming soon. If you want to intern with us, send me an email at info@londonreal.tv. I'm still trying to kick this cold, so my voice is a little bad, but I should be back in full effect next week. But for now, I give you Ms. Sarah Jane Pell.
Okay, shall we do this?
Yep.
Yes.
Let's have some fun?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. With me today is Mr. James Dawson, who is a former guest on the show and founder of The Humble Grape, which is a wine cellar and also conducts wine tasting. You could see James on the episode I titled Grape Juice King.
Yep.
What do you think of that title?
Not sure about it. If you'd asked me beforehand, I might have vetoed it.
Yeah, I know. But if you want to see James, you can go check that show out and find out a bit more about him. I also used to work with James in the city in my former years, but don't hold that against him. And our guest today is Ms. Sarah Jane Pell, who is a TED Fellow and an artist researcher who is inspired by the creative potentials of extreme environments, most notably in her case, underwater. I kind of thought you might have fins or something.
Gills, if you look closely.
I really wouldn't be surprised. She has done a lot of very interesting research and art. I believe you will be taking part, or have already taken part, in the Atlantica Undersea Colony, which will keep 3 people living underwater for 90 days. Sarah, welcome to London.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
It's awesome having you here. It's a real pleasure. I was speaking with James earlier, and in all of my left brain glory, I was trying to figure out who this woman is. You know, because I'm trying to, is she a researcher? Is she an artist? Is she a commercial diver? And I became lost and confused. And I can't be the first one to ask you that or to be confused because they don't know what to do with you. So what is an artist researcher, and can you explain your relationship with the water?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would like to clarify and say perhaps that I'm an aquabat or an aquanaut, but in real terms, it's easier to break it down for people. So my first passion, my first love is the arts, particularly the performing arts, and I'm interested in the body and how it moves in spaces, how it behaves and responds, and what I can do with that aesthetically, creatively, as a studio practice. When I say I'm a researcher, I like to push the limits of that art making and that practice to the limits somehow. So I'm investigating ideas. I start with a question. I'm curious about an issue, a topic, an idea, an unanswered question. And I use all sorts of mediums and disciplines in order to investigate that. I just throw it all in the mix. And it's very experimental. So it's completely in line with the type of practices we see an artist use in a studio, for instance. But my research might take me into a laboratory, it might take me into a particular type of field research scenario, into an expedition, into a collaborative project, whatever it is. So that's why I clarify and say artist researcher. And the other one is diver. Most of my work, say for the last 12 years, has been focused on the body in extreme environments, usually underwater. And I've looked at developing a kind of aqueous philosophy. I've looked at developing aquatic performances. I've looked at the nuts and bolts of commercial diving and what it means to live and work underwater, and all the sorts of spin-off possibilities that have arisen from that, whether that's looking at the body in space analog environments, for instance, when people dive underwater to train for space, looking at shallow water interactive play and exertion games underwater, all sorts of things. So I think it's easier to just say artist, researcher, diver, but in truth, I guess I'm a bit of a young Leonardo, sort of an art and science kind of polymath, and I'm guided by the questions that I ask. I'm guided by my own curiosities, and there's no real mold in which I neatly fit, but all of these things fall loosely under the umbrella of artist.
Do you find that people try to push you in one way or the other? They're trying to explain you as just an artist or just a researcher, or?
Not anymore.
No, okay.
Okay, initially, absolutely, yes. And it would get to the point where I'd laugh. Say a taxi driver would ask and be like, oh, which one do I decide? Because if I could just spell out one of them, it would be easy. And friends would laugh because if someone said, oh, you're an artist, so is it oil or watercolour? And of course I would have to say, watercolour. So people bring these assumptions to any conversation. You know, they have a clearly defined definition for what artist, researcher, or a diver is, but in truth I kind of blow them all out of the water.
And why water? Or have you ever been able to answer that question in your own mind of why you're attracted to water or why you feel natural or creative in the water?
I think it resonates with me on all number of levels. It's a beautiful, kind of peaceful, calming space in which you can connect with yourself, with the environment. And I'm interested in the creative potentials there and the honesty or the truth about being in that space, in those spaces. So for me, I guess if I look back to early childhood, I loved playing in the water. I loved being in the ocean. It was always almost dusk or twilight before I would come out of the ocean, and my parents would be on the shoreline whistling and calling, trying to beckon me back in. And I was just, it was otherworldly. And when I went to art school, I was living in a metropolitan area. I was doing painting and installation and sculptural work, all about the urban environment and the city grid and the hum and noise, the white pedestrian noise of this city block. And I guess my escape into another space or another creative space was always to imagine the endlessness and the life that you find in an ocean space or an aquatic space, and that breathing space that you're conscious of in those environments. And I sort of chose in my early 20s to redirect my entire career, my entire life, towards investigating the possibility of an underwater studio. And it began quite simply. I wasn't even a diver. I looked at the possibilities. I started talking with various professionals, from hyperbaric technicians to other types of divers and artists and so on, and said, look, I want to have a studio underwater. I want to perform underwater. I want to not only perform for an audience, but create or construct a space in which I perform as well. So really having a studio space, creating the parameters to explore something new, to bring something new out of myself into my work. And I imagined I'd literally be painting underwater. I imagined I'd literally be just using that environment as a catalyst or inspiration, as my new muse for a new body of work. I didn't imagine that 12, 15 years later I would still be sort of completely immersed in this type of thinking. But the further I got into it, it seemed that I would not only need to become a recreational diver, but I would have to become a commercial diver. And that meant everything from learning to weld underwater, to using a jackhammer, to all those glamorous things.
You can do those things.
I can do those things.
Okay. I believe you.
That commercial divers do. And in one way, it's absolutely absurd to somehow you wake up one morning and find yourself underwater in a cold dam at 6 degrees Celsius, over your head in mud, with a rope tied around your waist to the surface, using an umbilical and air supply via an umbilical, using tools that you would never, and performing work that you would never do on land, or I certainly wouldn't do on land. And there's a kind of ridiculousness in that discovery. You find yourself in this situation going, oh, what am I here for? What am I doing? But there's a beautiful opportunity in that as well, to understand how the body responds to body shocks, how the body responds to these new stimuli, how the body and how you emotionally engage with these protocols and these processes and these strict disciplines and these procedures, and then the really human side of being cold and working long hours and being sore and being tired, and then that additional layer of trying to creatively imagine from within that space, projecting yourself somewhere else, imagining you're floating in space, imagining that you're somewhere else, and so having kind of a split awareness, if you like, being very present in the physical body, but also being incredibly connected to the environment, the situation, and something beyond. And it's that sort of seduction or that possibility of something beyond that has kept me returning over and over and over to this space. I think that...
Sorry, we're just both mesmerized. Is this more of a self-discovery process for you
than a research or performing art? Because it seems like you're just trying to see how you react in these environments, or what happens to you.
Yes, I think a big part of, certainly where the work began as well, a big part of it was autobiographical, and a big part, which is not uncommon in the arts at all. And but I found myself, I started to direct all of this work towards a PhD, and in that context, you run up against human research ethics committees and so on, in the kind of academic structure, and I needed to argue and look very closely at why on earth you would be the principal researcher and the principal research subject, and how ethically you could delineate and validate your research from that kind of position. And through that processing and through that kind of understanding, I was able to argue some kind of strong points, retrospectively I can say that, for the rationale, for being able to provide some unique insights into the kind of, not only the psychology and the physiology, but also being able to report back some of the choreographic and creative potentials.
Objectively.
Not necessarily.
But that's what made it interesting.
And that's what made it interesting.
Yeah.
And saying, well, in fact, this is precisely the type of reporting that is missing. And if we look at, just to use another analogy, if we look at explorers of extreme environments, whether that's, say, the Arctic or the polar regions or the outer limits of space, for instance, the way we relate most personally to those experiences are through the writings, through the storytelling, through the explorers who have been able to translate not just what they did, but how it made them feel, what their experience of it really was, what their decision-making process was, how they faced challenges, what they learned, etc., etc., etc. So I went through that process and tried to live it, and I used the framework of live art, which is it's a kind of a budding tradition, if you like, in Australia. Australia had a kind of a clear sense of what performance art was, but the live art traditions were a little hazy. So I ended up coming to the UK, and the live art sort of has a pretty clear definition here.
Can you explain the difference between performance art and live art?
It's a bit hazy.
Yeah.
I think live art is sort of almost a bit... Okay, performance art, just to try and give it a framework, performance art came out of things like land art traditions, more installation and political based things, more situational type work, and the live art traditions have melded with performance and technology in different types of political ways. So the resulting work is relatively similar. But
What's an example of one of your live artworks? I mean, James and I have watched some of your videos on YouTube,
okay.
But for people that don't know you, can you explain some of your early work or recent work? Because it's pretty unique.
It's really unique. Okay, so one of the things that I was initially confronted with working underwater and living underwater was this twofold experience of being in a confined space and having a limited air supply, or a precious air pocket, a breathing space, and also being acutely aware of my own respiratory system and how that affected performance. So I created a performance piece which was performed maybe 4 or 5 times in different environments, where I put my 6'1" body inside a 50 centimetre high hemisphere, spherical, sort of a clear perspex hemisphere, and my body was sort of contorting underneath that. And I would start these performances with the hemisphere just sitting on the ground and my body inside it.
50 centimeters, so
50.
half a meter.
Half a metre.
And
so
you're squeezed inside this?
Squeezed inside that.
And it's underwater?
No, it's on the land.
It's
full
full of water?
It's not full of water.
Okay.
Okay, it's just full of air.
Full of air, okay.
Okay, so an audience sees this. And it doesn't look dangerous at all. There's, what's the big deal? You're underneath the hemisphere. It looks a little uncomfortable, but that's fine. But as the body starts moving and moving through the space, the condensation builds up, the CO2 builds up, and the oxygen starts to deplete. And of course, the hemisphere suction caps and seals to the floor. So the performance then is about sort of trying to move it and push it along, and to kind of clear that gap. But as the cycle sort of continues, more and more condensation builds up. You have those beautiful Titanic moments. More CO2, and you can kind of, swipe away the moisture. It's very, very beautiful.
But do you not start feeling anxious as it progresses?
No, well, it becomes kind of meditative, and as everything heats up and builds up, everything becomes wet and slippery. So you start to slide around in this little space, and it becomes something that was kind of uncomfortable becomes very embryonic. And as much as the audience can no longer see in, I can no longer see out. So I've suddenly created this other world. And in order to perform and survive in this other world, I must be very conscious of my performative actions. I must be very conscious of conserving my breath and my energies. So everything has to be natural, everything has to be fluid, everything has to be relaxed. Any type of anxiety will build up and increase and decrease the oxygen levels, obviously. So the performance inside that becomes sort of almost twisted and contorted and a little bit embryonic. So for the audience, they're watching this fully grown adult inside this space that looks like, a fetus within a womb.
Are you on a stage at this point, or are people walking around you?
On a stage. Usually the seating is such that the performance begins just with where I'm out of sight and they're getting live video feed and they don't know it's real. They don't know that.
Okay.
And then I kind of appear and come into the space, and there's quite a long performative trajectory. And the live video feed at some point cuts out because there's no longer anything to see. And they are acutely aware that I'm this tiny little human body in front of them that's grappling with this physiological or this constraint, and they are suddenly sitting there not knowing whether they're meant to intervene. So it becomes this duty of care type issue that I have with my audience and vice versa, which is similar to the relationship a diver would have with a support crew on the surface. Now, normally I had 16 minutes of air, and sometimes when there were cues. And I've had one instance where the sound technician, the cue was to cut the lights off and I would come out and the audience would never see me break the seal. But a sound technician got lost track of time. He was just off in his other world. And it took 35 minutes. And then he realised, and I've had situations like that. So
you went double the time that you were going to be
double the time. And the performance was absolutely intense, as you can imagine. And by that, I was absolutely exhausted. And then I go through a whole post-performance sort of observational period and rehydration and, I'm under observation, just like I would be had I been diving, had I been, have that post-performance care. So that, in a sense, is a ritual. It's a performance, it's a type of installation, it's a type of relationship with the audience that we would call live art.
Okay, because you're not performing per se, you're doing something, and they have a range of emotions from panic to,
true,
like you said,
and
trying to help you.
And it's not just stunt and spectacle. It's not like theatre where I have a script. I set up the parameters. I've got a challenge, and then I commit to showing that vulnerability, to exposing and being true in the moment, and having the kind of courage or whatever it is to just be raw in that moment.
And did you feel that was almost like a kind of therapy? That maybe days afterwards you felt some changes in you and there was something going on there?
I loved it.
You can't explain?
I loved it, and I loved that performance. And I remember the last time I performed it, someone said, listen, people would they would wait around after this post-performance thing to come and touch me afterwards. And I felt that it was such a violating experience. I hated that.
Yeah, because you've just come out of the womb.
I've just come out of the womb. I've just had my little quiet time. I've just been off in this glorious kind of imaginative space.
They want to touch you, not just talk to you. They want to
They
touch
want
you.
to, and it's the way of reassuring themselves that I'm okay. I understand that. So, strangers, complete strangers, waiting in the foyer or a green room for hours to do
You
this.
need some bounces.
And it's like, yeah. So on the last performance, I thought, all right, this is ridiculous. So I sat myself on a stool at the end of the performance, completely disclosed the fact that I took my little dome off, sat, and I could discuss and I could sit there with the audience and they could touch me as they wished. And they all stood around me and stayed and talked about their experience of the work. So they just, anyway, at the end of it, I was exhausted. They had completely dumped their entire lives and they walked away feeling fabulous. Feeling fabulous, and I felt rotten, and I never, to this day, I left the dome in the gallery and I never went back, and I've never performed it since.
How long ago was that?
2005.
So you haven't performed that for 8 years?
No.
And the first time you performed it was?
2002.
Wow.
But I loved that work. But that's just an example of one of the works. So from the experience of diving, I just take this one small component, because I can't often get an ocean in a gallery or a museum. Curators just don't like that. So I try and take this one aspect that I can amplify somehow for an audience.
That sounds like a heavy thing to watch. It sounds more emotional than any Cirque du Soleil that I've seen.
It does, but it sounds to me almost that kind of activity could be very beneficial for some people. I mean, I think we all struggle to meditate, and we all struggle to be in the moment and be at peace with ourselves. And if you can do something like that and avoid being touched afterwards, I think personally that could be, for some people who can control that and control their breathing and control what they're doing during the time they're doing that and slow stuff down and try not to be wasteful and be mindful of what's going on. If you do that on your own, I think it could be quite a powerful experience.
Well, were you careful not to you can't practice it, right? Because if you're not in the moment experiencing panicking, then that's not your art, right?
No, true. There are certain elements that I would look at. Little things like, just do it from here to there and just film a little bit to make sure my underpants aren't going somewhere strange, or those kinds of things, just to work
Logistics.
out so that I could relax.
Okay.
I could relax. But then I have to trust the process too. So it is a little bit, as you say, a little bit meditative. It's a little bit like dance. It's a little bit like what a freediver would talk about. So there's partly that kind of yoga type aspect to the work, where you have both the discipline and the kind of mental surrender that you need, in a way, to be able to undertake the work efficiently and smoothly. But also there's enough of awareness too that I'm a performer, there's my audience, I can heighten this bit. And the other thing I do is amplify my breathing. So I have a microphone inside with me, so that not only am I cocooned and cacophoned, like being inside a conch shell or something, the entire audience feel like they're completely surrounded in this space too.
Yeah, I noticed that on your videos on YouTube, that audio is a really important part of her art, because it's magnified, and it really, it brings a lot of emotion and empathy into what you're doing.
Well, this is what we experience as divers. So divers would know that when you put the breathing apparatus on, you're constantly aware of your breath, and any changes in your breathing or your breath or respiration are immediate. They supersede any other sound that you're going to listen to during that period of time.
Even after 1,500 hours of diving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you're so acutely attuned to your breath. I mean, you know where you are in the water because of, the way your lungs are filled. You know where you are, you know what you're doing, you know how fit you are, how you're performing, you know whether there's the slightest contaminant or whether you have the slightest congestion. I mean, you're pretty conscious of that. It becomes part of it's your tool. It's your body. It's your life. So
To get so people have a bit of a range of some of your other performances, what is one other thing that is one of your highlights that maybe is a little bit different than that one, that to give people an idea of the other kind of performances you do? I saw one where there was a spherical transparent piece on your head.
Yes.
Where you were
filled with water.
I don't know if that's the one you want to describe, but that's one that I saw. And there was one where you were
in a big wheel rolling down a beach.
Yes.
And then into the water.
And then one with wings underwater. Okay. Choose one, but what's another one that's representative?
I'll give you a pair.
Okay.
A pair, the wings one. And I was fascinated by Da Vinci and his work. So I took some studies of his wings from the Natural History Museum, and I created a full life-size version of this apparatus that was designed for flight. And of course I had to try it out underwater. So the original sketch showed that you should be using chicken wire and rabbit skin glue and all these sorts of elements. And cane. And I used these elements and wore it in a pool and completely shredded my forearms. So we readjusted it, and I used a beautiful thin plastic sheeting over the wings, and then I attempted to perform underwater, to fly underwater. So the performance itself is a little bit like Icarus, in my feeble attempts
when
to try
too high.
When it goes too high, it's just
so it's a struggle, and nothing, not particularly beautiful.
This ambition is ridiculous, and it was beautiful, but it was this kind of performance of failure, if you like, or of ambition. But when I surrendered to it, when I drew can you imagine trying to use your upper body strength to flap like a bird with,
underwater? Yes,
2.5 meter long. I mean, even with a 2 meter fin on your legs, that would be hard work. So you've got these literally two enormous fins that you're trying to work and propel. It doesn't work like that at all.
Well, there's no example of any sea animal with a bigger fin than its body.
No.
For that reason.
So if you put the fins back, or the fins, wings, back, as if you're in a dive position and diving down, then they're incredibly streamlined and so powerful in their design and efficiency that I went down into the water so fast that it was almost really, really difficult and dangerous to create the drag that was required to stop my descent. And that kind of footage is beautiful as well. So in parallel to that work, so the Da Vinci wings on one side, I had the
Da Vinci wheel.
The Da Vinci wheel. And of course I needed to wear a frock, as you do, and be the female body in the Da Vinci wheel and roll along the seashore, along, over and over and over, and then into the water, repeatedly into the water, dunking and dunking myself. So it referenced all sorts of water rituals, wheel rituals, etc., but it was also about a kind of recalcitrance, about this kind of defiance of this woman, choosing to do this, choosing to go from the land back into the sea. And I just liked the play. It was really quite a playful performance as well.
But you seemed so relaxed as you were rolling. Even as your face went into the water, you just seemed relaxed. When you emerged on the other side, you were just relaxed, calm, and seemed to be enjoying yourself. It wasn't like you were freaked out every time you got dunked.
No, well, I was freaking out a little. We had only a few hours to shoot, and there was an enormous thunderstorm coming, and you can see it in the background of the film footage. And so there am I with it literally strapped in. So if I fell over, if there's shells or rocks which were scattered all over the beach, if the wheel got thrown off balance, I was literally strapped in. It would have been
face plant,
big time. It could have been a tremendous injury, but yes, I was strapped in, and I was worried about getting electrocuted. We've got an electrical storm coming, and I'm going into the water strapped to a metal wheel. It's ridiculous.
So those are good examples of your art, and I was wondering if you could give us an example of some of your research. Now, the Atlantica project sounds pretty epic to me.
And that's huge. That's huge. That's not my specific.
Right.
That's
not your specific, but you're going to participate in it, right?
That's right. So the mission commander is a fellow by the name of Dennis Chamberlain, and he and his wife are both seasoned explorers. They've been involved in other subsea habitat projects. They are setting up a mission for a two-stage mission. The first is a 90-day subsea habitat project that leads into a permanent colony which will be situated in Florida Keys. So Dennis is a NASA engineer, but this is a private project, and we have collaborators from all around the world participating in this. So the intention is for the three of them, the husband and wife team and one other Aquanaut, will spend the 90 days, and there are a group of us, about 24 of us, who are coming and going in 5-day increments, and we will be supporting the project.
Playing cards and stuff.
Playing cards,
So
getting them to perform.
Are they underwater but breathing oxygen, or are they actually
are.
submerged? How does it work?
They're going to live in effectively like a caravan underwater. They're going to have...
Like a submarine?
Like a habitat, yes.
Okay.
That's more at the bottom. So we will be obviously going into decompression because we will be ascending and descending, and therefore we will be able to go out into the ocean and perform. But these guys are going to be...
And how deep is that?
Well, I'm not allowed to technically say.
Oh, right.
Yes, but
Deep enough to be
deep
scary.
enough. Oh, not so, deep enough to be stable, actually. So
Okay.
not scary.
Has this been done before? Or for non-military reasons, do we know if anything like that's been done before?
This will be the longest undersea habitat project.
Okay.
So one of the people on the program had the current record is only 69 days. So we have the record holders on this project as well, and this is a civilian project. It's an international project, and it's really exciting. But if you compare to the type of projects we have in space, for instance, we have people who have spent more than a year in space. So there's a huge difference, and I think we imagine that we've spent all this time underwater, but the truth is we really haven't, unless we've been in submarines, unless we've been doing other types of things.
What happens to your body if you stay in that environment? There's a lot of documentation about what happens to people in space and how they have to recover when they get back.
Sure.
Do we know what happens in the underwater environment?
Yes, we do, and it's similar on many levels. So we have the risk of decompression illness, which is prevalent in all types of diving or all activities where you're breathing air underwater. And that just literally means that you have an increase in nitrogen in the body, and the body needs to expel that and get rid of that nitrogen. And if there is an inhibitor, or if you ascend too quickly, or if there's a problem, decompression illness can cause, eventually it can cause death. So we know this. There are also some longer-term issues. There are immediate hazards, but the longer-term issues with bone necrosis and all sorts of symptoms and problems that we see with divers.
Yeah, a lot of old divers in the past, as they got older, they would find a lot of these problems from this continued exposure to the nitrogen, right? Without being decompressed.
And we kind of colloquially just call it the silent bubbles. There are not that many communities in the world where we have some really good medical understandings or records about the long-term exposures of this. We have short duration understandings, and hyperbaric knowledge is fantastic. But for the long duration divers, people who are repetitive bounced divers, for instance, all of their lives, pearl divers, for instance, we can look to the local communities and see the elderly and see that they have rickety legs. We can see that they have all sorts of problems, but we don't have great studies to draw from in that area.
Now, what do you say to the person that says, why do we do this, Sarah? We've got people in the space station, International Space Station, that stay up there for a year on end, and they say to you, why?
Well, part of it is just the human curiosity. We are natural explorers. We naturally seek answers to extraordinary questions, I think, both to understand ourselves, but also to understand how to protect our species, how to better support and sustain our lifestyle as a species. So I think being an explorer is a natural part of life. I'm fascinated by the space analog environment of the ocean, but I'm also deeply fascinated about what we can do as human beings to protect and be custodians of the planet and the environment in which we have. And I honestly believe that these kinds of projects, like the Atlantica project, are incremental steps or necessary steps for us being able to have a human presence in remote stations around the world, around the globe, around our various oceans, in order to be able to monitor to be able to work, to live and work, to ensure there's a kind of a harmonious, sustainable approach to environmental monitoring.
And I noticed that those people in the Leviathan have to learn extremely hard not to be wasteful.
Yes.
And you could take some of the learnings from that and extrapolate that to our lives on a day-to-day basis. We just we waste a lot. I mean,
yeah, and it's like carbon dioxide, everything you're going to be monitoring.
Absolutely. And look, we don't have, the attempt is to be able to develop a zero waste culture. And that's our dream, that's our ambition. We don't have anything, there's no such thing, there's nothing that we can look at on this planet or off this planet that we can say is a complete closed loop. So a lot of my work in various ways, I've worked with the International Space University and on a NASA-sponsored project developing a closed-loop habitat system for the moon, and we explored all of the types of systems that were currently in existence. We mashed them together. We kind of literally created a mock-up that incorporated, this type of engineering aspect from this country and this demonstrated technology from this project, etc., etc. We put them all together on what we thought would be the penultimate type of advanced life support system as we know it today to achieve a closed loop, and we were still only at about a 90%, and that was the highest achievable that they'd ever that to that date they had come across. So in real life, there's no such thing as really blocking it off.
I suppose that even the Earth isn't a closed loop.
Absolutely not.
So,
there's always a transfer, and I think I try to look at that performatively as well. I try to look at that exchange, whether it's on this level with the body and the breathing, but whether it's on this level with an audience member or a human being, but also what does that say? How can those little localized gestures speak about the politics of the wider social condition or the wider environmental condition or our human nature and our human technology and where we're going? I mean, how can we critique the natural future extension of what we're talking about?
Yeah, this is all very valuable research, and I can see how it can be beneficial for the future. And how do you get funding for this? Is it environmental agencies, or do you have to get it privately? How does that model work for you?
A real mixture. It depends on the kind of work. So if I'm talking about, if the project is fitting into the artist category, it sort of looks towards one type of funding support. If it's couched in art and science research, there are other options available. If it's the artist being involved in global interdisciplinary projects, then obviously we look really broadly. So I freelance, I work from project to project, I work internationally, I work in Australia, and there's no rhyme or reason. I look for the best kind of support for the project and the ideas, and I look for with the best kinds of collaborators to achieve that goal. So there's no fixed body that...
I keep thinking of the James Bond movie, The Spy Who Loved Me. You seen that movie?
Yes.
Mr. Carl Stromberg. He's that crazy evil villain that wants to live underwater, and he's going to nuke the whole
not a crazy
world.
evil villain.
Are you sure?
Absolutely.
Well, he wants to nuke the world, and he's living undersea, and he's got all the fish and stuff.
Yeah, no, that's not me.
Okay.
I'm insulted that you've made that association, actually.
And
we could talk, but
that can't be the first time you've heard that.
Absolutely.
It is. It looks like it.
Okay, but you know what I'm talking about.
I know what
I thought you were going to say I look like a Bond girl, but no, you've insulted me with this.
Well, that's just obvious, you know. That wouldn't be very creative of me. But, you know, he had the sharks that, you know, killed. Anyways. So, okay, fair enough.
So, can I just say...
Yes.
That I haven't performed for a while. Okay, so more of my work in the last few years has been more diving work, but also research-based work. Working with the European Space Agency to develop an arts initiative, working with an exertion games lab developing technologies for playful interactions underwater, those kinds of things. So while this research has many aspects, and my job title, my job description just gets pulled apart and pushed back together over and over and over. It sort of all comes together under a future vision of living and working underwater. Can I say that? I say that
And,
sheepishly.
and the analogies you have with space and all that kind of stuff, I would imagine the research for living underwater is not even a thousandth of what it is of people living in space. So.
That's true.
I thought you were about to say that you miss performing. I thought you were going to do some performance with a glass of water or something.
I do. I miss performing.
Can you
actually.
spin the glass around a few times without any water spilling out?
No, not with a microphone.
Well, will you perform again? Is that like, because when you describe your art, you seem like someone who needs to perform.
I do.
You know? You
I
must
do.
be an artist at your core.
Yes. So everything is a little bit performative,
Okay.
but I haven't been doing a great deal of performance, and that is a bit of a problem. That is a bit of a struggle, but.
Because
there's-
performance is lacking in the research community, right? I mean, you must bump into a lot of
There is-
scientists
there
that
isn't any.
they're introverts. Like, they probably don't even like talking, let alone performing. I'm sorry, I apologize to. But you must be quite unique in that field.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, and that's a good thing. And there's a good. I like to come into a space, a collaborative space, and be the disruptor, and to turn the conversations around a little bit. You know, let's not go with all of our assumptions. Let's look at the language we use, and let's not take anything for granted because you're part of an interdisciplinary group, and suddenly rules are no longer rules that we know it, and the terms of engagement change, and that's a fantastic way of creating or both working towards new discovery, but it's a great way to, I guess, purposefully bring about creative thought, different types of discussions, and potentially lead to new types of innovation. So process patching ideas from all sorts of things is, kind of fantastic. I thrive in those environments. I love it. So I love talking to engineers. I love talking to, astronauts. I love talking to, fishermen who've been out on the water for 30 years and who know the ocean back to front, and not just through what they observe, but the stories and the poetry that comes from living that type of life. Like, that's just, for an artist, this is all just like being in a global playground every day. So I feel a little...
What reactions do you get usually from the scientific community? All these people when you push their buttons.
I can, yes. But also, at least I get introduced. I'm a doctor, so, that helps.
Some street cred.
Get some street cred, okay. So they don't necessarily know I don't come from a science background. But I've also, since completing my PhD, I have actually studied at the International Space University and Singularity University at NASA Ames. So I've stepped into those communities. I've deliberately attempted to learn the language of those groups of engineers and scientists working particularly in those areas, both in the innovation and startup community, entrepreneurship, big thinking, blue sky thinking, but also the groups who are working on long-term visions for human spaceflight and exploration. And it helps to be able to recognize that language, and it helps to be able to use that language to reflect back and to translate or communicate some of the ideas that I might bring to it.
Now going to your street cred, you are also a TED Fellow.
Yes.
Now, what is that like, and what is that? And that must help a lot? I hate saying street cred, but...
TED Fellow without the X, yeah?
Yeah, without
yes,
the X.
that's
You saw that.
thing.
But I mean, that must also help when you walk into these communities a little bit. But could you explain what it is and how it's changed your life, if it has?
The only Australian TED Fellow.
Yes. I should, yes.
I like that.
Now, there are 2 TED Fellows who are living in Australia, but yes. Okay, so TED stands for Technology, Entertainment and Design, and it's a kind of a global conference phenomena which has now got extraordinary reach through its online presence as well as its live presence, and that has been extended, as you say, through the TEDx events, which are the locally hosted regional events. So the TED platform is an opportunity for ideas worth spreading. And it's not just limited to technology, entertainment and design. It's open to sort of broad entrepreneurship, journalism, social and political activism, right through across the board. So you have an extraordinary amount of speakers coming to present in this quite tight format their ideas. And the TED Fellows program was set up to enable, I guess, the budding TEDsters, if you like, to have an opportunity to be a part of this extraordinary community and and in some ways enable this extraordinary community to mentor and support and to come in contact with those who have, in some way, I think they describe it as someone who's shown exceptional courage, talent, and promise in the kind of area of expertise or interest or life or what have you. So, and the other unique aspect is that the TED Fellows program is curated. So the fellowship, there are 20 to 25 individuals selected in each fellowship round, and it's a curated fellowship. So they examine all of the applicants, there's thousands of applicants, so that you get a group of people together who naturally have this natural affinity. And so for me, I was given awarded a TED Fellowship in 2010, and I walked in and met these people, and honestly, it was like a family instantly. Wow. And we were all so inspired and by each other and supportive of each other, and the synergies were so apparent and so multi-layered that it didn't matter whether, in that case, I had come from the remote west coast of regional Tasmania, where I'd been diving, repetitive diving, 2 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week, in total darkness, doing really manual work away from the rest of the world with limited communications with the outside world. I went from that right to Long Beach, California, to this extraordinary event with other fellows who had come from all over the world, and we just clicked together as a group. And we've continued to build projects together, to support each other, to work together, and TED gives you a platform to speak as well.
Okay. Now Rachel's a senior fellow,
that's right? Yes.
What is...
Okay, so the TED Fellows have an opportunity to put in a single application to become a TED Senior Fellow at some point. So the fellowship lasts for a year, where you're taken to one of the big TED conferences, and you're supported, and you're given a life coach, and you're mentored. And then the TED Senior Fellow proposes both a project and kind of commits to being to developing something further for 5 years and going to 5 different TED events.
Okay.
So I haven't put in my application yet.
Okay.
But I would dearly love to be a senior fellow.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about Rachel? I mean, she's the one that recommended that you apply for the TED Fellowship. Is that right?
That's right, yes. Rachel, I had first been introduced to Rachel at an extraordinary conference called Metamorphosis, and I was aware of her science fiction writing and her work in that looked at this speculative fiction for an alien world, where she described the human condition in these extraordinary terms in these extreme environments. So naturally I was intrigued. And then I learnt that she was also a medical doctor who had been advising and working with all different types of practitioners, including a lot of live artists. So she had worked with Stelarc and the types of surgery and procedures that he needed to go through for working with prosthetic arms and prosthesis and kind of invasive technologies within his own body in order to augment it and augment its performance. So we had this natural kind of community and connection. Rachel now is working in the realms of biotechnology, and our communities kind of overlap.
Yeah, she was our guest a few months ago. You can see her on our episode called Earth's Bright Future, a better title maybe than The Great
Just King. just a turn.
Yeah, and her Twitter handle is @LivingArchitect, I think. And yeah, she's got some fascinating ideas.
Great ideas.
Long-term stuff. I have to ask you a bit about TED. I mean, TED,
sure.
There's so many good talks. So many of our guests have been TED speakers before.
Yes.
I don't know if we've had many TED fellows before. Now, you know, lately TED's got a little heat because they've pulled a few lectures off their websites. We've had Graham Hancock in here, Rupert Sheldrake, and some of their episodes were kind of taken off and put back on. And there was a guy named Eddie Huang, who was a fellow in LA, who walked out on the TED conference after 6 days and said it was oppressive because he had to stay there all day. I had to ask you, what do you say to that? Do you have any comment? Has TED been good to you? I don't know.
TED's been extraordinary to me.
Okay.
I'm a bit of a TED fan.
Okay.
Okay, so for me, it's been an absolute privilege, and it's one of the most exciting arenas that you can be a part of.
Okay.
And I think they do a tremendous job of not only curating the events but curating the talks. And there's an element to that, like any live performance, where there are going to be little hiccups and bumps. But 99.9% of that is broadcast to the world. And still, some of my talks haven't been put online yet. I mean, there's an enormous backlog. There's an enormous wealth of contributions that have been made to the TED program. And I think TED handles it really well. There's been some expectation, I think, as TED's got bigger and bigger and bigger, that it's infallible, it's this huge giant, but really it's still the same individuals and the same format, and people volunteering themselves, their ideas, putting themselves on the line to communicate and to nurture this idea of ideas worth sharing or ideas worth spreading. And I think that's a beautiful thing, and I think these little, when something gets so big, I think people try to look for kinks in the armor and think it's okay to throw dirt. Is that the expression?
They're comparing it to Scientology, and it's like everyone has to kind of fit in and do this and go to the conferences and do that. So,
well, I think there is a certain expectation for fellows, and that is participation. So if you have been flown over from your particular part of the world, it's only if the event is only for a few days, the idea is that you participate. And as you say, the fellowship is curated. It's not just the talk that's been commissioned. So
yeah, it's like London Real. People participate, they give their time for free, and then something beautiful comes from it. Yeah.
The curation's interesting because like you were put together with all these like-minded people, and that sounds like that's been a huge benefit for you.
Absolutely.
And I guess as the public, we just see the talk, but you're saying there's a lot more going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely. So we're given the opportunity. We have sort of all sorts of events and opportunities. We have mentors, coaches. We have opportunities to network, to look at collaborative potentials together, to support each other. And of course, we're kind of the fellows. We all stick together. I mean, there's a huge community out there of extraordinarily successful people who have achieved a lot. So the TEDsters themselves are just, kind of an inspirational audience. And the TEDsters we've flown in from, it could be a tiny little village in the middle of Africa. So we support each other through that process, and it's a great privilege to have that support structure. And I think they're very aware of making sure we have a space to go to be together, to come together, and to nurture each other through that. Okay. Otherwise, it can be a bit daunting.
Fair enough. No, I mean overall, TED. I mean the talks are, they're genuinely consistently good.
Yes.
If you tell someone there's a TED talk, you can expect a certain level of relevance, competence, all that good stuff.
Puts a bit of pressure on.
Yeah.
It's nice in a way. It's like a step up.
How many talks have you given at TED?
At TED itself?
Yeah.
I've only given the one.
The TEDx one.
No, TED.
Oh, the TED in Long Beach.
In Long Beach.
Okay.
And then I've given a number of TEDx talks.
Okay.
So more and more will come online.
Were you nervous for TED?
Yes. Which is like this. I only spoke recently about this with the TED Fellows Director, but just before I went on stage, a fellow who had assisted us with the coaching of the slides beforehand just said, I think you should really hide a few of those slides. You're going to put a lot of the audience, they'll be, off. Because it's like you're going to put them, they're going to be uneasy about seeing these types of images.
Like you confined to the 50 centimeter ball. Okay.
And look, the thought hadn't even crossed my mind until that point. It was just before I was about to go on.
And that made you nervous, I suppose.
I did, and I thought, in some ways, should I be holding back? Should I somehow kind of be apologising for this work? And it wasn't until about halfway through the talk that I went, I'm here.
This is what it is.
This is what it is.
Needs to be
I
out
need to
there.
put myself on the line, and this is the work, and be strong about that. So.
There's so much pressure. You can feel it in the TED people when they go up, because it's what you said. It's either 13 minutes or 18 minutes.
Well, and the TED Fellows, we have what is called a TED-U, which is the university, TED University, which is a program beforehand, and we have an audience of say 500 people, just to smooth us into the big TED. And we give 3-minute talks. Now that is harder. You've got to have the same amount of punch and clarity, and you've got to be able to transport an audience and do exactly what you do in an 18-minute talk in 3 minutes. And if that's your only shot, if that's all they ever see of you, it's got to be a good 3 minutes.
Yeah, it's like a comedian, you know, 3 minutes isn't much. You see people get up there and it's like, okay, they want to be witty, they want to be relaxed, they want to be relevant, they want to try to teach you something in, okay, 13 minutes, it feels like 11 minutes. And it's you know, the lights are on, right?
So any tips for people about to go and speak in front of a huge audience like that? Because I always feel fairly relaxed and confident, and then as I get up there, whether there's 20 people or 50 people or 500 people, and I do this at least twice a month, it always kind of hits me. So tips for us.
There are some instances where I feel uncomfortable, but generally speaking, I think it's about, if you know your stuff, if you know what you're about to talk about and you feel passionate about it, you haven't been coerced into speaking about something you're not interested in, then you're going to be able to deliver. And I think one of the nice things I do is I can do breathing, I can do physical things, I can do performative warm-up things, but one of the nicest, most reassuring things is to look out at an audience beforehand and go, they really want me to succeed. They don't want to watch someone bumbling. Yeah. They don't want to watch someone coughing or choking on their words. This audience really wants me to just blow them away. And somehow that just calms everything. It's like, nobody wants you to fail here. So you don't even have to think about that.
Wow. So say I'm an extremely wealthy benefactor and I'm giving you a 5-year horizon, and you have an unlimited funds, you can work with anybody in the world. What would you do? It could be art, it could be research, but what's that one project that's like on the back of your mind that you haven't been able to do? Maybe something that's more, you know, not Atlantica. I'm sure it's something very unique to you.
Yes. I was offered $1 billion the other day as a thought.
Yeah, me too.
Yes. It's like that kind of wasn't enough. But I would like to work with James Cameron, and not in the way that you would imagine. I have a vision or an idea where I would like to utilize, this sounds bizarre, out of context this sounds bizarre, but work with me.
He's just on a film underwater, right?
He's got another one on the go at the moment in New Zealand, so he'll be around down under for quite a while.
Okay.
But he's doing extraordinary exploration work as well as creative work, which I admire immensely. And
because he fell in love with the capsule during the filming of the Titanic, right? And now he goes very, very low depths in the ocean on his own, right? Is that
That's
it?
right.
Okay.
So he's
I'll let you talk.
He's done some extraordinary work where he has gone to the deepest parts of the Mariana Trench and brought back
11,000 meters.
That's right, and brought back an enormous amount of research. Yeah. Now he's just donated that beautiful sub to NAUI for continuing research, which is tremendous. And he's got other projects where he's sort of going into the water.
He's gone down alone? Yes, 11,000 meters.
Yes, he had 2 attempts, but he ran into some troubles with the battery initially. So he needed to work on that and then go down. And he was successful in that. It was an extraordinary expedition, a privately funded, tremendously courageous expedition. He produced some amazing technology to enable that to happen. And he's also brought back an enormous amount of material for further research. So
yeah, that's pretty scary. I'd rather go to space on my own than down there.
Would you be scared at all to go down there? Or you...
Of course I would.
Okay.
Of course I would, but I would take on that challenge and not be as daunted as going into space. I
agree with James. I think I'd rather go into space.
It's dark down there.
It's dark in space too.
It's dark in space too. You're watching too many movies, maybe.
But yes, my big project, my big vision.
What would you like to do with him?
I have this vision and this idea that, I mean, water has so many computational properties. We can direct, we can start to store information in water. I would like to see that our ocean systems, rather than setting up nodes for telecommunication, rather than using, spending billions and billions of dollars in cloud computing, that we actually use our oceans as our storage for all data and information transfer, and we start to use our oceans as natural architectures. So technically, this is possible. And I think that's a beautiful way of merging both our future with a future biology, our future technology, are both in the most sophisticated and gorgeous way.
And is that because of the salts and stuff in the ocean? Does that help the salts and the ions, or
Not
chemically, how would that work?
All right, I'm not a physicist, I'm not a chemist, but I have been able to sort of pull together a number of extraordinary kind of little projects. So, and say, okay, if we put this together and this together and this together, much like we did with the Lunar Gaia project for NASA Ames, these things are possible. So we have physicists who are using the computational properties of bubbles and droplets to be able to create simple little computational gates. Yes, no, maybe. We have other researchers only in the last 12 months who have been able to store an extraordinary amount of data, more than hundreds of computers, into a small molecule. And then, okay, it takes 70 hours, but we can extrapolate that information by decoding it to pull it out.
Wow.
If we can do that with one molecule, we can do that with a water molecule. So if we start to combine these types of things, we can send frequencies through water in order to be able to change and direct its shape. So we start to combine some of these possibilities and these technologies, and I mean, you know, an artist here, it's my idea to dream and imagine and say, okay, I can't tell you all of the steps to enable this technology to occur, but I can start to describe as an artist the type of technicity that we need, you know, the type of thinking that we can take on board to make an extraordinary vision like this possible.
Sounds like something Rachel might help with.
Yes, we presented it at a conference with her earlier this week, and I'm pitching it again in a kind of different format on the weekend at another architectural conference.
What do you think the timeline for something like this, with the realms of possibility? Is it 100 years, 500, or?
No, well, see, I've just been, in 2010 I also attended the Singularity University, so, 100 years is really far out there. Yeah. I think we're talking about, if you have a lot of, I think the technologies that are required for it we're talking a 5 to 10 year time frame. But what will be the critical element will be the convergence of those types of technologies. So if we're talking about a 15 to 20 year time frame, I think that's realistic.
Wow, this is something that reminds me of Rachel's talk, where she's talking about these big ideas that are hard to kind of conceive. And I'm completely forgetting Rachel's surname. It's Armstrong, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, Rachel. But yeah, they're big ideas.
They're huge. And there's a lot of freedom in having a huge idea.
Yeah.
It's like, well, clearly the pathway that we imagine for it now is not going to be the pathway. Therefore, we don't have to be so precious with that. Right. We can come at this kind of problem or this idea from so many different angles and pursue all of them equally. And there's a great liberty in that. I like that kind of thinking, and it enables me to tackle other projects along the way to kind of build towards what I imagine a big vision would be.
I was listening to Sarah in the beginning, and I was just like sitting there listening to her, and I'm like, thank God we have people like this in the world, that aren't just, doing our 9-to-5 jobs, that like think like all these crazy ideas, whether it's art or research and all this stuff, because like it's inspiring to listen to, and like I can't think of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting Brian this morning. We had a quick phone conversation. I got up early this morning to do a bit of research on you, and I was just like, wow, this is really exciting. I couldn't even conceive of someone like you until today, and now here you are telling us that we could potentially store all our data in the ocean. It's just unbelievable.
Well,
just that idea is, yeah.
Well, think about what it means, okay, from a performer. If we take that to its natural conclusion, imagine how much of our body is made up of water?
And our brain.
And our brain.
80%.
Okay. And how much of our atmosphere is made up of water? Extraordinary amount, really.
Yeah.
So suddenly you start to think, if we've been projecting and imagining, I mean, you don't think it's outrageous to imagine a future where our virtual life and our real life are that distinct? That's not outrageous. We've got so much technology around us that we go, oh yeah, that's a given. But imagine if that virtual and that real technology was actually not part of a carbon-based system, not part of a
Something that interacts more easily with the human body, like water.
Or something a system that naturally exists.
Yeah.
And we're just tapping into it. So in some ways it's kind of an ancient gift that we already have on this planet. And in another way, we're just bringing our advanced thinking to work with it and in harmony. I mean, that kind of makes sense to me. And that's a way where I can naturally go, well, then I'm not so daunted about this radical future where our biology and our technology completely intermesh and are almost indistinguishable. I mean, which is the case almost now.
Yeah.
Who were your role models? Sorry, your role models growing up? Did you? I mean, because you have quite a unique thing you've done with your career. But who'd you look up to?
I don't know. I think I love circus clowns. I love tennis stars. I had a fetish for Boy George at one stage, and I was kind of a typical kid.
Who didn't?
Who didn't?
You did, Brian.
I liked it. I liked his voice. Anyways.
I even wore boxing boots just like him.
I believe you.
But I think the people that I guess influenced me most were kind of my own family members, and those in my own communities who I saw as fearless or strong or determined or just able to be themselves, and I admired that immensely.
Now, there's people listening out there, maybe it's a 15 or 20-year-old girl or a boy, and they're like, okay, how can I grow up and be like Sarah? You must have come up with a lot of obstacles. People must have told you were insane with some of your artwork and all that stuff, and I'm just wondering what kind of advice you give them, if they want to, be a TED Fellow one day.
Okay, well, I think there's lots of people who would like to be a TED Fellow, yes, but I don't know that there'd be so many young students or girls or people who'd say, I want to be an artist, researcher, diver. I think most people would want to be one of those things, not all of those things. And my advice to them would be to have the courage to explore what you're passionate about, and not be limited by society's expectation of fitting within a pre-existing mold. That it is okay to ask questions, it's okay to explore, it's okay to open yourself to the possibility of new discovery. And it might be a little alienating, it might be a little challenging at times, but there is an enormous community of people who are very similar, and they're the people that you need to gravitate towards. Find yourself, find where you're best supported, find where you feel most alive in the world and where you thrive, and that is exactly where you're meant to be.
Do you think people should be prepared to feel uncomfortable and be prepared to be told that they're a little crazy and get used to that kind of feeling, because then maybe they're on the right path?
I think the only people that say that's a little bit crazy are the kinds of people who are a little bit frightened that I might actually be doing something worthwhile. I don't think it's said arbitrarily. I don't think it's said off the cuff. It's usually from people who kind of go, oh, gosh, that's quite difficult to handle, because that kind of has some basis. And that's the point at which it is uncomfortable for them. But I haven't been called crazy for a long time.
Until today.
Extraordinary, maybe.
What do they say? Poor people are crazy, rich people are eccentric.
Yes.
Or maybe TED Fellows are eccentric.
Yes, but I don't get called ordinary.
Okay, I believe that.
I completely embrace the fact that all of the ordinary things that most people take for granted I find really difficult. And I don't have that enormous skill set to do all of those things. What is kind of easier for me to grasp are all of these things that other people find extraordinary. And that's kind of my safe zone. So I have a great deal of respect for people from all different walks of life and the way that they manage their worlds and their lives.
What's an ordinary thing that you're not good at?
Well, I don't have a home.
Okay.
So, like, simple things, like, things that people take for granted. Oh, surely this is all in order. I don't have that in order. I've sacrificed, or I haven't given attention to these kinds of things in order to be able to do the other kind of work, or to be able to live and work and breathe my work, not just write about it. And that's been really critical. You know, if I'm going to propose an idea, then I'm going to have to create that idea. I'm going to have to test that idea. I'm going to have to live with that idea. Otherwise, you know, it's not fair to ask that of anyone else to sort of step into that, unless I'm prepared to do that myself.
So you're totally immersed in everything.
Absolutely.
Do you know who Jack White is? He's part of the White Stripes. Do you know that band?
Yep.
It's kind of like I guess they have their basis in blues and rock, and he's quite a very creative, eccentric musician. And there was like an interview with him, and he talked about how he would create music, and he'd put the piano. He plays a bunch of instruments at the same time, and he'd put the piano like a half a step away too far, and he'd play an instrument with 2 strings instead of 4. And he'd put all these challenges to him when he would make his music, and he'd find a way to do it, or he'd find something new about the music when he did do it. And when Sarah was describing her sphere experiment, or her sphere live art, it felt like the same thing. Like it seems like you're just trying to put yourself in these weird, strange, new environments and find out what happens, almost for the sake of it, or the sake of learning.
Not always, not always. But I can see where you're coming from. I think I like some of the Harry Houdini sort of projects where he says, you know, the bind is, if you're an escape artist, you've got to be confined first. And I think, you know, I have this natural tendency to want to explore and to go beyond myself. And I kind of run into this challenge where it's like, okay, well, I have to set up the parameter in order to go beyond it. And I find this over and over and over. I do create a challenge in which I need to surpass those limits somehow. And sometimes that's just theoretically with a question. Like, I've set this an extraordinary question for myself, oh my goodness, and I have to go to the end of the earth to be able to answer it. But it can be also this physical manifestation as well. You know, I really would like to explore the depths of the ocean. I really would like to go to the Mariana Trench, and I really would like to be able to look at how that impacts the human psyche and the human behaviours and limits, and to be able to talk about that, because I think increasingly, whether it's myself, whether it's my grandchildren, whether it's us as an entire species, we're going to be moving further and further towards more increasingly extreme environments, more alien environments. And life, whether it's actual or virtual, is going to be this phenomena that is beyond our known limits, beyond our known experiences. So how can we begin to embrace that now? How do we even talk about that now? How do we visualize that?
So that's, you know, one of the things that I've been dying to ask you is, how do you run your day? Because you've got this research side of you that must be kind of process left brain driven, and then you've got the artistic side, which is right brain. You know, I'm a list guy. I make a list. I get up in the morning. I'm like, okay, I've got to knock those 10 things off the list. I'm done. If I can get 7 or 8, high five.
I'm with you.
I'm a list person too.
You do lists, but then you also. But how does that not stifle your creativity? Does that not kind of put you into a boundary?
I have little, I have a list system. So it's not just the list. I have these kind of chunking methods where, you know, this is particularly that type of activity, this is this type of activity. So I might be doing a lot of admin, but I might be doing a lot of research work, I might be doing a lot of creative work, but they're kind of chunked together in groups. So, and then I give myself the freedom to go with that which I'm feeling. So if I wake up at 3 a.m. and I'm just inspired, then that's when I tick off all of those aspects of that particular list, and I'm really grateful that I can do that. And if in the afternoon, if I've run out of energy and I'm low in blood sugar or something like that, I will just do all of the menial things that are on that list. All of the things that don't require any type of passionate input. It's just a matter of, you know, just doing it, going through the motions, etc., etc. And that is the same performatively as well. It's the same whether I'm going for a run, whether I'm exploring something choreographically, whether I'm building something, whether I'm in a studio space or not. And it will depend on the location. If I'm in a hotel room or if I'm in a crew house diving, I don't have access to a traditional type of studio space where I can make things. But I kind of chunk time, blocks of time per year where, okay, for 3 months I'm going to be working with this particular lab, or for 3 months I'm going to be working in this pristine remote environment. And I know I have to let everything else go. All of the expectations of being able to Skype 3 times a day, I have to let that go. I'm going to be hard pressed to get telephone coverage in that area. And I just make a commitment to trust that, okay, the things that are important will happen. If I need to change my life to make that happen, I will do that. And I have that flexibility. Without the kind of anchors that I talked about that most people have, I can develop a nomadic, portable practice and step into these arenas and just sort of give it everything when I'm there. Then I step out of it and I go into a different space. So I have these little rituals to make sure that, like a turtle, like my little dome on my back, like I have these little rituals so that I feel like I have a home with me wherever I go, and a little practice so I can wake up in any space and
feel comfortable,
do my thing, and just be centered and focused. But it's
I need like a documentary or a Sarah reality show. It'd be nice to see like a month in your life.
and what it is that you do for fun.
Don't say dive. Well, what is it you do for fun?
I would probably dance.
Yeah.
Just completely let go. Yes.
On your own, in a club, people.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
And I'm probably going to finish up here with it's a classic London Real question, but if you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Sarah and give her a bit of advice, and it can't be, keep going, girl, give her a little bit of advice, what would it be?
I think it would be, probably at that time in my life, it would have been really important to just say, don't ever let anyone's gender bias get in the way of the decisions that you make. I think I've confronted that an awful lot in the type of work and environments that I've stretched into, not so much in the arts, but certainly in other male-dominated industries. And
diving or research?
Diving, space research, working with engineers, working with technologists, working particularly in the physical aspects of commercial diving and cruise. So I think some of my decisions were based on that kind of politeness in those environments. And, I'm happy to continue to be polite, but I don't think I need to hesitate.
Okay.
And I think that's important.
I'm sure you're not polite when the time is right.
I'm always polite.
Okay.
But I just become sterner.
Or less.
Okay. Just like Carl Stromberg in 007. All right.
Well, we're back there again.
I'm going to stick with that analogy, but a female version. Awesome. Anyways. Sarah, how do people get a hold of you? How do they find out what you're doing? You got a pretty awesome website, I must say.
Thank you.
But yeah, how do they find you?
SarahJanePell.com. They can follow me on Twitter, which is Aquabatics. I also have Sarah Jane Pell as a Twitter feed as well.
Okay.
There's also the Sarah Jane Pell blog site too.
Is that on your website or accessible via your website?
Yes, both.
Yeah.
So Sarah Jane Pell is a great repository. You get links to absolutely everything if you'd like to connect, and send me an email if you'd like to, collaborate, do something extraordinary. I love adventures.
James Cameron, if you're listening, which he might see this.
I might send it to him. No, especially.
Why not? You have a fantastic website. It's just got all of your videos, and I mean, I stare at your website for like hours trying to figure out who the hell is this? Who is this? Because you've got all this art, you've got your videos, you got your TED Talks, and you've got like all this, you got the Atlantica, all these projects. So,
is it too much?
It's a little bit intimidating.
Really?
There's just so much to you. It's hard to digest
Okay, so should it be more
even in 15
cohesive?
minutes.
You're much more personable than I thought you would.
The videos work well because the video and your TED talk and stuff, then I could immediately after an hour on the website, I was like, okay, video done.
Do you think it's off-putting?
No. It's great. It's great.
Hey, maybe us men just find her intimidating because she's so accomplished. I don't know. Well, I didn't even ask you, what are you doing in London and how long are you here for?
Well, I came for an extraordinary conference called Future Cities, which was organised by Rachel Armstrong, actually. And that was with a great group from the Avatar group at the University of Greenwich. And it was looking at a project that they're doing, which is part of the 100-Year Starship project.
Love this, yeah.
Which is great. So it's really futurist thinking, and that was fantastic. I'm also here to speak at the Smart Geometry Conference, which is at the Bartlett on the weekend, which is again another, I'm giving a keynote at the symposium, which is looking at uncertain futures and how we design for uncertain futures. So that will be kind of an amazing event. Next week, I'm flying to Paris and I'm really excited. I'm premiering a new interactive water project at Chi Interactivity, which is the Computer-Human Interaction Conference. It's like the penultimate. And we've got an interactive installation of some new underwater technologies that I've created, these little creatures, if you like, with little beautiful tentacles. Yeah. And they mimic human motion underwater, this interaction between the water and the body, and they kind of dance with you. So I have, in one tank, I'm calling them exploration fish, and this is a homage to Frank White, who's a philosopher who talks about the overview effect that astronauts experience in space. And he says, you know, we as a species, we're like exploration fish, and we're going to move from terra firma Earth out into Solaris and beyond. And so I've created these little exploration fish, and they look like sea anemones with beautiful little tentacles. And inside them, they have a multi-axis kind of robot that is being fed this motion data. And they light up these beautiful colours, and they move like a little school of fish.
They all move together.
They move together. So
wow.
There's some video of this on your website. Yeah.
So you interact with mother fish, and then the baby fish, these little exploration fish, kind of dance over there. And we've perfected it since that video.
Okay.
We've been tweaking it so that it does some really cool things to showcase at this venue. So while I'm only demonstrating the basic technology, my dream is to perform next year with them underwater with motion sensors all over my body, and have an entire school of fish or exploration fish dancing and illuminated with me underwater.
That's
we don't,
crazy.
you know,
that's cool.
You're going to do this in France?
I'm going to do it in Australia and possibly in France as well.
Okay.
And we have, you know, like we haven't even lived under the water for very long. It's only 69 days. Well, we don't have any motion tracking of the human body underwater.
Really? Oh, wow.
We don't. So we have 2-axis motion capture of the swimmers and people in shallow water. We have nothing of the diver's body, or nothing of the free diver's body, or nothing of the aquabat body. So I'm working with a group at the Exertion Games Lab at RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia, and we're going to develop this technology and look at the choreographic potentials for that too. It's really exciting.
That's very cool.
Wow. My brain is full. Sarah Jane Pell, thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Just amazing. Much more than I expected. You're much cooler than I thought you would be.
Way, way cooler.
Yeah. And you're 10 times better than a Bond girl, so who are you kidding? If you're listening to us on iTunes, please subscribe. If you want to see our faces and see what everyone looks like, please come to our YouTube channel, which is London Real TV. And yeah, follow Sarah on Twitter. We're on Twitter too. We're on Facebook. We're going to be taking a picture right after this that we'll put up on Facebook and Twitter. So come check us out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
and I didn't even get to learn about you guys. I feel so selfish.
But if you come back and do that performance in France next year, we might come be there.
Please do.
Come shoot it or something. That sounds incredible.
Fantastic.
So anyways, best of luck with you and everything here. And yeah, it doesn't sound like there's no flies on her, as we say in the States.
Not at all.
No. Sorry. Thank you so much.
Didn't talk about the snorks or the dual rebreather, but
yeah.
I think we've got some interesting stuff.
Well, we could save it for next time.
All
right. Well, as we say at London Real, until then, it's about the journey. Thank you.
It's about the journey. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome to London.
So, and then there was very rapidly, so that was my first case report, which came out of the SAS.
So you were in the SAS already?
I was in the SAS already.
And it's rare for a doctor to go in the SAS, is that what you're saying?
To pass selection, to actually become a badged soldier, so you become part of the regiment as a soldier rather than just as a doctor.
And why the SAS? And for my American people listening,